Hello and welcome to Top Story. Today, have Afghanistan and Pakistan put aside their differences to fight together against the Taliban? At a peace jirga or council in Kabul of leading political figures and some 700 Pashtun tribal leaders from both sides of the Afghan-Pakistani border, President Pervez Musharraf of Pakistan said on Sunday that the two countries had to join together to defeat the forces of extremism. He and President Karzai of Afghanistan signed a 6-point declaration on cooperation against terrorism. The appearance of the Pakistani leader was a shot in the arm for the jirga, following his last-minute decision not to attend the opening day on Thursday. Relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan have become strained in recent years, with many Afghans accusing the Pakistani government of providing tacit support for the Taliban. General Musharraf admitted in Kabul that Pakistan's tribal areas were providing support for the Taliban, but insisted on the commitment of his government to fighting what he called a small minority that was creating violence and backwardness. Well, joining me now to discuss the jirga and its implications for Afghan-Pakistani cooperation in the war against the Taliban is Mariam Abu Zahab, a specialist on the region at the Centre for International Studies and Research here in Paris. Thanks very much for being on Top Story. But before we get into the detail of the jirga itself, I suppose President Karzai is under a lot of pressure because of this crisis with the South Korean hostages. That's been hanging over him all throughout the last few days of the jirga.
Yes, and because Taliban have made all kinds of contradictory statements, and President Karzai had said before that he would not yield because of what happened after the Italian journalist was released. So he's under tremendous pressure from both sides to do something. It's
a constant reminder to him of why it's so important for this peace jirga, in fact, to get the Pakistani sides and the Afghani side to cooperate on this issue.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Although Pakistan doesn't have anything to do with this, current hostage crisis, but still it's extremely important for both of them. Yeah.
What about the jirga itself? How much has it, do you think, cleared the air between the Pakistanis and the Afghans? Because there clearly have been problems in the past.
Yes, there are many problems even now, and the jirga will not solve anything. There have been so much violence and so many problems over the last 30 years that it's not this jirga which will change anything, but it's already some kind of breakthrough because of what President Musharraf said. For the first time, he acknowledged that the Taliban have a safe haven, like the Americans said, and which was very much criticized in Pakistan, a safe haven in the tribal areas and in Pakistan, and actually it's much more in Baluchistan. So this is something completely new, which Musharraf had been denying before, and he said it in Kabul, so it's all the more important. Then it's important that it should bring the people together and see that they have a common cause on both sides of the border. So that it will take time, but let's hope that...
It was a conciliatory Musharraf, conciliatory I suppose, even that he went to Kabul, but to say that, even more so. But in concrete terms, what is that admission likely to lead to?
Well, that he will have to do more on his side of the border to fight the Taliban and all. But this doing more could prove counterproductive, because Pakistan has been doing much already, and the Americans are constantly blowing hot and cold, and they say you're not doing enough. So there will be U.S. unilateral military action in Pakistan, which puts Pakistan's sovereignty into question. So that's why Musharraf has immediately, a few days later, launched a huge military operation in Waziristan to show the Americans who are doing something. But what Musharraf is aiming at is containment of the radical tribal elements rather than defeat. So he's always walking a tightrope, because otherwise, if he's doing more, there's a threshold which Pakistani military cannot cross. Otherwise, you have a good part of the population in the tribal areas which are now neutral or pro-government, and they will join the radicals if the military operation goes on.
He's tipping them the other way onto the Taliban side. And he points out with some justification too that Pakistan has been doing its bit in the fight against the Taliban. 90,000 troops and police in Waziristan along the border with Afghanistan. 900 Pakistani soldiers killed in recent years in that fighting. So it's not as though Pakistan's doing nothing. doing, is it?
No, Pakistan has been doing a lot, and Pakistan has been, but particularly against foreigners, much more than against Taliban and against local Taliban, because there are still elements in the Pakistani army who are saying that America will not stay there forever, and that they have a card to play in Afghanistan, and the Taliban will be that card again once the Americans leave. So that's why, although this is all based on this strategic depths and all, which was a complete failure, but you still have elements inside the Pakistani army who believe that, who are still supporting the Taliban.
What is it that so irritates the Afghans then about what the Pakistans have been doing or haven't been doing?
It's that Pakistan is denying that the Taliban are using Pakistan as kind of sanctuary, and this is still very much the case in Balochistan, much less in Waziristan, there the problems are different. It's very much the case in Balochistan and in the north in Bajaur, and that they have this financial support from some of the Pashtun tribes in Pakistan, that they have training grounds in Pakistan, and that they can cross the border so easily because the border is still very porous in Balochistan.
And presumably that the Pakistani government knows precisely where those training grounds are and is not doing anything about it.
Yeah, and knows precisely where the Taliban commanders are living in Quetta and doesn't do anything against them, except under tremendous American pressure. So that's what the Afghans are approaching. But in this Jirga didn't talk about few sensitive issues like the border, the Durand line. While as long as Afghanistan doesn't recognize the Durand line as international border, it's difficult for them to blame Pakistan for not doing anything. A border which Afghans don't recognize. So there the Americans have to put some pressure on the Afghans.
President Musharraf is himself under enormous pressure within Afghanistan. We had the recent incident with the Lal Masjid Mosque, the Red Mosque in Peshawar, and also enormous political pressure. He's just lost a big case with the judiciary in Pakistan. How much does this impact on his ability to deal with problems like the border issue with Afghanistan?
Yeah, it's extremely difficult because now he wants to be re-elected next month, and with this new judicial activism, the Supreme Court is going to create hurdles in his way because the Chief Justice doesn't want Musharraf to stay as Army Chief of Staff and as President at the same time. And if Musharraf gets re-elected, well, there will be, a petition in the Supreme Court from all the opposition parties, and this will create a huge problem for the country. So now he has several options, but he's also under tremendous American pressure because the Americans.
I just wanted to get into that very briefly because we're running out of time. The Americans really were putting a lot of pressure on this Jirga to take place at all. They want a lot more from Pakistan.
They want a lot more, yeah. They always want Pakistan to do more, but they want now free and fair elections, which means that Musharraf should open the political space to the mainstream parties, because he can fight extremism only with the help of the mainstream parties. And now his uniform has become kind of red tag for everybody in Pakistan, including politicians.
Okay, that's all we have time for today. Thanks very much to Mariam Abu Zahab for joining us to talk about the Peace Jirga in Kabul over the last few days. Join us again for another edition of Top Story tomorrow. Goodbye.